Good morning. Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Monday, July 24th. It is, what time is it? 10 after 7 in the morning, and as always, just stepped out of the shower. Kettle is boiling, getting my morning coffee ready, and I thought I'd start the day with whatever thoughts are on my mind. And then up here in the village, there's no Wi-Fi. I'm not staying in a guest house. I'm not in a hotel, so I have no Wi-Fi. And the funny thing is, this always happens. For the last few days, I've been thinking about moving into Bukitingi just for 1 or 2 nights, like to move into a hotel, just so I can use Wi-Fi. Because I have a couple of videos that I shot for YouTube, and I'd like to upload them. And I can't do that from here because I don't have Wi-Fi. So I was going to... Again, I was thinking I would do that today. You know, as soon as I woke up, I thought, okay, let's book a hotel room. So I was going to fire up my phone and get onto Agoda and look for a place to stay for a couple of nights. It's a little bit risky. I want to stay in a new place. But of course, you don't know whether they have good Wi-Fi or not. So you're taking a chance. But of course, as soon as I turned on my phone to book this hotel room, I got a message saying, oh, you just came to the end of your data. Whatever mobile data I had on my package, I think I had about 5 gigabytes of data the last time I charged it up. And I guess when you're watching YouTube videos, it really absorbs a lot of data. And it just, you know, as soon as I really needed my phone to book a hotel room, I turned it on. Boop! Oh, no data, so I can't even connect. So... Yeah, it's funny how much I depend on the internet now. Once the internet is gone, you know, it's like my life comes to a screeching halt. Luckily, my kettle is not powered by the internet, so I can still boil water for coffee. Yesterday was not a very eventful day. I spent the entire day here, sitting here, drinking coffee and editing a video. I went on a bike ride, as I talked about previously. I rode my bike, or I tried to ride my bike up to a lookout point on Mount Singalang. And it turned out I couldn't ride my bike because it was just way too steep. So I pushed my bike up to the lookout point. Really nice day. It was a sunny day, good weather, so that was a really good day. And I recorded that whole day on video, and I recorded it with 2 GoPros at the same time. One on I've got it right here, my GoPro broomstick, and I'll have a mounting apparatus on the front, which, you know, points forward from the bike and aims back at me. And then I had another GoPro mounted on the handlebars. So I had those 2 GoPros recording all the time, simultaneously. So that complicates editing quite a bit, because first, when you import those 2 video tracks into your editing program, you've got to line them up. So basically you import one on one video track and you import the other on top of it on a second video track, but then you have to sync them up so that they're lined up. And I do that. I can't really just cut back and forth between them just by cutting and splicing, like taking some of this video, some of that video, because I'm generally speaking, and right in the middle of me speaking is when I want to cut from one perspective to the other perspective, back and forth from the 2 cameras. So basically, it has to be a perfectly smooth transition. So then I have to, you know, import them both at the same time, one on top of the other, and then use the audio tracks to sync them up perfectly. And then I mute the audio on one, and because of the microphones that I'm using right now, then I have to edit the audio tracks as well. I have to split them up and make sure they have the right settings for left and right channels. If you make a mistake there, because I'm importing, I don't know, 50 or 60 separate video clips, and I have to do this for every single video clip. If I miss 1 or 2 or 3, suddenly you'll hear the audio only in one ear, because that's the way these microphones work, the way I have them set up. They record only to the left or to the right channels. And then I have to sort of split it and send that same audio to the left and the right, so you hear it coming out of both speakers, or with earphones, you know, you hear it in both ears. So I have to do that for every single video track. And yeah, it gets a little bit complicated. And I don't know if there's an easier way to do this, but what I do, coffee's ready to go. I'll be right back. There it is, my morning cup of coffee. Now the day can officially begin. I was just talking about the way I edit 2 video tracks and jump from one to the other. And again, as I said, I don't know if this is a good way to do it, but it matches my needs. So what I have, of course, is 2 video tracks of the same time period from one GoPro and the other video track from the other GoPro. And then I take one of the video tracks and I shrink it down to a tiny box in the corner so I can see both videos at the same time. The main one is filling the whole screen, and the second one I've shrunk it down to a little box in the corner, and then I play the video and I can see them both at the same time, and I'm listening to whatever it is I'm saying. So I go through that video clip and I'm making decisions about, oh, okay, I want from here to here, I want this camera angle, but then from here to here, I want this video, and then, oh, now I want to switch back to this GoPro, and I decide when to switch from one GoPro to the other and keep going back and forth throughout the whole video clip. And then once I know what to do, then I cut the video at each point where I want to make a shift, and that cuts through all of the video tracks and all of the audio tracks all at once. And I do that I have to link them all. So once I've imported all of it, I have to link the 2 video tracks and the 2 audio tracks all together so it's one unit. So when I cut it, it cuts through all 4 of them at the same time. But then when I go back and now I know I want this section of the clip, I want it to be GoPro number 1, then I have to unlink all of those 4 sections. And then what I do, let's say I've decided I want it to be GoPro number 1, the full screen one, then I go to the video track of the miniature, the one that I've minimized, and I put the opacity to 0. So I basically make it invisible. So I don't delete that section of video. I leave it there. It's still in the editing program and it's still there. I don't delete it. I just make it invisible. And then I go to the next one, and now I want GoPro 2 to be the video. So then I have to do 2 things. I take that minimized video, and if it's invisible, of course, I have to put opacity to 100. So now it's visible again, and then I remove all of the editing that minimized it, so it goes back to full screen. So now I have GoPro number 2 and GoPro number 1. Both video tracks are there, but now I have GoPro number 2 video sitting on top of GoPro number 1 and obscuring it. So in every case, both videos are there. I haven't deleted anything. All I've done is I go back and forth between making one invisible or visible. Invisible, visible, by changing the opacity. And then I go through the entire, video that way. And I like doing it that way. I don't want to delete anything ever, because once you've deleted something, you can never go back. It's a point of no return. I've deleted the video, I've deleted the audio, and then if I want to make a change or I made a mistake, I can't fix anything because it's gone. So with the audio as well, I have 2 audio tracks, one from GoPro number 1 and audio from GoPro number 2, and instead of deleting the audio I don't need, I just reduce the volume to 0. So the audio track is still there, but it's just set to 0 so you don't hear it. Because sometimes the audio from GoPro number 1 will screw up. There's a problem with it, and then I have a backup. Turns out I have 2 backups, because my Rode Wireless Go's also record audio internally, and I also copy those onto my laptop, and I have those available as well, so that if the main audio track is corrupted, and then the GoPro number 2 doesn't sound very good usually, because it's this GoPro that doesn't have a microphone on it, so I'm just using internal mics. And if I happen to be cycling, it's exposed to the wind and I get nothing but wind noise. So then I can go all the way back to my backup audio track for the internal ones, and I can import it and splice it and stick it in. So that's what I do. And because I do all that, and because I'm very slow, it takes forever. So yesterday, I mean, I was working on this video like the day that I did my bike ride. You know, I rode my bike up and then I got back here maybe mid-afternoon. And then I worked on that video from mid-afternoon all the way into the night until I went to bed. And then yesterday I woke up, you know, around this time, you know, 5, 6, 7 in the morning. And then I started editing the video probably 8 in the morning. And then I worked basically 12 hours straight from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, just going through this process I just described. And then I finished, at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And at that point, then I had to export it. So I went to sleep. I went to bed at about 9. I was exhausted. And but it's going to take about an hour. It took exactly an hour and 50 minutes to export the video. So even though you're done editing the video, the rough edit, you're nowhere near done yet because you still have to export it. And I just wanted to go to bed, but I put my laptop on the floor over there, got it off the bed. You got to keep it raised up a little bit because it gets very hot with all this work. It overheats, so you need as much airflow around it as possible. And then I just, set it to export the video, and I knew it was going to take about 2 hours to do that. And then I just turned out the light and I left the computer working for 2 hours, as I, tried to go to sleep. So yeah, that was a long time. And now, of course, I do have the final video. I woke up this morning, got out of bed, and it had finished exporting. And I checked it over already, and it seemed okay. Everything seemed to have worked out. But now I still have to upload it to YouTube, and that's where I'm running into my roadblock because I have no Wi-Fi here. I can't upload anything here. And so I'm probably going to go into town today to stay in a hotel, and then I can upload backlog of videos. In terms of like what I think of as main channel Planet Doug videos, I have my video about flying here, and I have the video about going out with Chati and Fauzan for a walk around the village. They told me about the history and the culture of this place and the language, things like that. And then I have the video about going for upside down coffee with them. And then I have this video about my bike ride in this area up to the lookout point. So I have 4 videos for Planet Doug to upload. And I think I recorded one of these morning journal videos almost every morning that I've been here. So I probably have 6, 7, or 8 of these videos to upload. It's crazy. Yeah. When I was out on my bike ride, using the 2 GoPro technique and using my my broomstick for mounting one of my GoPros, I had a lot of trouble, mainly because there's just so many little problems. I mean, the overall GoPro universe is trouble to begin with, because most of the time you're using one of these evil things, like the thumb screw. This is a good one. This is one I bought myself. I'm moving very carefully here because I don't want to spill my coffee. But yeah, I mean, this is a GoPro thumb screw. And that is, the whole GoPro mounting system is based on this thumb screw, where there's little fingers and you stick this in and then you screw it into place. And these are just horrible to work with. For one thing, I can't get a grip on them. My fingers aren't strong enough to tighten it down enough. If you're on a bike, bouncing over rocks and things, your GoPro has to be really tightened into place. And you can't tighten one of these enough using just your fingers. So now, you're riding along and you're babbling away into your GoPro, and then you see that your GoPro is pointing at the ground, because it came loose. So what you have to do is get your own thumb screws, with these wings on them, and that gives you more torque, and you can really tighten them down. Or you can get a little wrench, like there's a GoPro wrench you can buy, that does that. But that wrench can be problems as well, because you can over torque it, because all the mounting things are plastic. and you put that wrench on there, and then you have to be very careful because you can snap everything very easily by applying too much force. Plus, once you have this in the combined with the media mod, which I use for my GoPro, the thumb screw goes underneath. There's a cutout in the bottom of the media mod, and the thumb screw goes into that cutout, and then you can't reach it with the wrench anymore. So you can't use the wrench if you're using the media mod. You have to use a special GoPro that is longer and thinner, so it fits into this cutout. And it's so tiny and goes into this cutout, you can't reach it at all with your fingers. And it's just a horrible, horrible system. So I got really fed up with it that day. I had so much trouble, especially because, as I talked about, my door to my media mod is also broken, you know. And that gets in the way. I use, you know, these wingtip thumb screws, but now when I put the wingtip in, the door hits the wingtip. So even my elastic band doesn't work because it hits the wingtip, and then I can't tighten or loosen the wingtip. It's just one problem after another. And my broken door is also the result of the GoPro being poorly designed, because every time you have to change the battery on the GoPro, you have to open the door and remove your GoPro in order to get at the battery, which means that you are opening and closing this battery constantly. At least I am. I'll have to open this, did I say battery? I have to open and close this door constantly. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day, changing the battery, changing the memory card, removing the memory card to, you know, copy the files to your laptop. You're opening and closing this door multiple times every single day, and the latch is not designed for that much use. And of course, after a while, I tried to open the door and the latch just snapped off because it's not meant, you know, it's not a heavy-duty latching system. It's made out of plastic and tiny springs and tiny screws. So the fact that you have to open it to get at the internals is what caused the door to fail. So I blame everything on GoPro's poor design of the media mod. Anyway, I got really fed up with it on that day, and I decided to spend a little bit of time yesterday seeing if I can rework a new system, because when I went back to Malaysia, I bought some new gadgets, and my idea was to use the quick release buckle system entirely, if I can. Because the thing about GoPros is that they have two mounting systems. You've got the finger mounts with the thumb screws, and you've got quick release buckles, you know, which click into these bigger mounting things here. And as you dive into the GoPro world of accessories, some of them use finger mounts, some of them use quick release buckles. And then you have to mix and match them. So if you want to move your GoPro from one mount to another, you're often moving it from a system that uses a finger mount to a system that uses a quick release buckle. And then you get into this whole world of adapters and things like that. So what I wanted to do was somehow use only the quick release buckles this time. So I wanted to have a quick release buckle for every one of my mounting options. So that would be my stick, handlebar, hand grip number 1, hand grip number 2, and chest harness. So I want all of them to be the same. I don't want to have to switch from one to the other And yeah, I kind of made some progress, so I'm pretty excited about that, actually. And the reason I can do this is that when I was back in Malaysia, I bought some new handlebar mounts. So this is a system it has the quick release buckle built into it, and then you're supposed to wrap this around your bicycle's handlebars. And I bought 2 of them. I have this one, which is the small one, and I tried to find 2 like this, but I couldn't, and I also bought an extra large one. So I have 2 of these right now. So I figured out that it can actually fit around my broomstick. So now, instead of using my RAM mount, and the RAM mount uses the GoPro fingers, I thought maybe I can use this. So I fiddled around yesterday, and it's pretty close. It almost doesn't work, but I managed to get it to work. So now I've got this on here, and I can use the quick release buckle. And a cool thing about this is that it turns around. So it actually rotates and then locks into different 90-degree positions. Oh, and actually more than 90 degrees. So I can have the GoPro pointing forward or backward and just sort of spin it around. So that takes care of my broomstick quick release mount. So once I have it on there, and if I have a GoPro, you know, on a quick release buckle, so I can slide that in, I can attach the GoPro. Now I've got the GoPro here, I want to take it off. Instead of fiddling with the finger mounts, now I can slide off the buckle. It's never as easy as it was there. I mean, these are difficult to work with as well. But yeah, basically, it's designed for quick release, that you can slide it into place and you hear a click, locks into place, and it's got a rubber tab that doubly locks it. So you raise the rubber tab, squeeze the arms and push it out. So it comes off, and then on my three-way grip, which I use when I'm walking around half the time, it comes, the new one from GoPro, the old one had a finger grip, but the new one has a quick release mount. So now I can go from here to here easily. So I've got two taken care of. So far, so good. And I have my Jaws flex clamp, and it also has a quick release system built into it. So there, that works. But then I run into a problem because this isn't long enough. Like, it's good for clamping it to tables and chairs and things, but when I'm using it as a selfie stick, it isn't long enough because I have to hold it way up in the air to get it, you know, at eye level. And it's really awkward to use. So what I normally do is I add an extension arm. So this is my extension arm. This comes with the Insta360, and I put the extension arm on a quick release buckle. So now that locks into place. Now it's longer, the height is right, but then you run into the problem because the top of this thing has a finger mount that doesn't have a quick release buckle. So now my system is starting to fall apart. But I have some other gizmos here. Where's that gizmo? There we go. This is a very rare device from GoPro. I've only seen it one time, I think, and I saw it, and it's made by GoPro. It's a GoPro product, but I've never seen it again. I've only seen it one time, and I bought it, and it is an actual quick release buckle with a tripod thread on the bottom, which drives me crazy. Because this is the one time that I want the GoPro finger mount, because I've got this thing, but I want to attach it to here. But I can't do it because this is a finger mount, and now this is a tripod threaded mount, which is so ironic because in all of my GoPro gear, I keep wishing they had tripod threaded mounts, and GoPro generally refuses to incorporate, you know, the 1/4-20 tripod threaded mounts. They won't put it into anything. It just doesn't exist. Like, you know, the bottom of the GoPro uses these finger mounts, but it doesn't have a tripod mount. You know, they could easily do it. They could easily put a tripod mount in there along with the finger mounts, but they just refuse to do it. And I think they refuse to do it because it means you have to keep buying GoPro accessories. So if you want to mount a GoPro on a tripod, you kind of have to buy a GoPro grip and a GoPro tripod. If it had a tripod threaded mount, you could put it on any tripod. You know, you already have one at home probably. So I'm pretty sure it's a marketing decision from GoPro. They will not use tripod threaded, you know, 1/4-20 mounts. They just won't do it. But there's one product they make that is really, really useful, This is the one GoPro thing I've seen that actually has a tripod threaded mount, which is amazing. But oddly enough, it's the one gizmo from them that I wish it had the threaded, wish it had the thumb screw, the finger mount. Like, why don't they make two versions of it? Like, make one with the threaded mount and make one with the GoPro fingers. So the one device I really need to have fingers on it is the one device GoPro makes that doesn't have fingers on it. It's like they knew. So then you have to dive into the world of adapters, and I happen to have a bunch of them. And here's an adapter that goes from tripod threaded mount to GoPro finger mount. And this is kind of ironic too. Let's see if I can find my other gizmo here. Because the funny thing is that there is a whole bunch of these things out there. So these go from tripod threaded mount to GoPro finger mount. You can buy these anywhere. There's like millions of them all over the place. And then you can slide this into the GoPro fingers here, and then take your thumb screw and attach it. So you think, that's great, you're all done, because now I've got a tripod there. But it doesn't really work, because this threaded mount, the only way you can attach things is by screwing them in. And there's no way to control where it tightens up. Maybe you have to use one of these yourself to know what I'm talking about. But this screws into place, and you basically screw it down until it tightens. But it's on the wrong angle. I need it facing this way. But just because of the thread, I just happen to reach the end of the thread to tighten it down. So every time you tighten it down, it ends up on a different angle, and your GoPro is pointing in the wrong direction. And they try to fix that problem with these rings on the bottom. They have these rings, and you're supposed to put something on and get it to where you want it to go. So I want it to be pointing forward, and then you're supposed to take this ring on the bottom and tighten it upwards so that it tightens against this thing. However, I'm here to tell you that this doesn't work. It just does not work. You cannot get it lined up enough, because look, it's off angle now. You can fight with this, and you can fight with this, and there's no way to tighten this ring enough to hold a GoPro in place. And you end up fighting with it, like, okay, is that the right spot? Oh, I'm off by, an 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch. I got to loosen it, try again, and you try over and over and over again. And basically, these things are completely useless. And then I was online months ago, or years ago actually, looking for a solution. Like, there must be a way to fix this problem. And that's when I came across this gizmo, which is exactly the same, except it is fixed. So it has a fixed mounting system that is separate from the tightening system. So this thing is always pointing in this direction, and then you can put this on here and then tighten that up, and it just holds it in place. So now this thing is always pointing forward. So now, in order for me to complete my trifecta of quick release mounting things, you can see what's happening here. And this is my problem with the GoPro world in general. I had to go from, quick release to GoPro finger with thumb screw to extension arm to thumb screw to adapter to another adapter, and finally, after all of that, I can now attach the other adapter, which I attach the GoPro to. So I basically created this Frankenstein's monster, and by the time you've done all that, you've raised it up so high above the mounting point, and you've made it so heavy that every time you wiggle this thing, it just bends, because It's so hard to apply enough torque to hold this in place. But look at that mess that I've created, and I haven't even put the camera on there yet. I've gone from adapter to adapter to arm to adapter to adapter to adapter to adapter to finally be able to mount my GoPro. It's just insane. But anyway, it does kind of work, and I'm still working on this system a little bit. However, the good thing is that this does work, and this is simple and this is elegant. I can now use a quick release mount on my broomstick for mounting the GoPro. So I'm sure that made no sense at all to anyone out there that doesn't work with GoPros. All of that, of course, is only the GoPros mounted on my bike. I also want to mount a second one on a chest mount or something. And while I was back in Malaysia a while ago, someone gave me one of these. And I thought maybe this would be kind of a cool thing to try. Like, instead of using a chest harness, which is kind of hot and uncomfortable to wear all day, I thought I could use this neck mount. And I don't know, I've never used it, I've never tried it. I just kept thinking it would be uncomfortable, and it's not fixed, so it would be swinging all over the place. But I thought I could give it a try. And then, I was trying it out yesterday, but as with everything, there are unintended consequences. So you put this around your neck, and your GoPro hangs here upside down, which is okay. It can film upside down. And then if you're riding the bike, this gives a nice POV point of view. However, can you see the problem? It lands right on top of my microphone. So yeah, I can't do it. There's no way. I tried to lower the microphone underneath it, but then it's so far away it doesn't work. So this whole mounting apparatus, it interferes with the microphone. So that was a complete dead end, that little gizmo. But yeah, it's not easy setting up all these cameras and microphones and things once you try and put it on a bicycle. Yeah, it's really hard to do. So that is also what is on my mind this morning. Pop culture update. At some point over the last couple of days, I watched the last episode of Series 6 of Black Mirror. I was talking about Series 6 the other day, and my overall feeling is that it's in terms of Black Mirror, like classic Black Mirror, futuristic technology in society stories, it's one of the weaker seasons because it is more heavily into supernatural and crime stories and supernatural stories, more so than technology. So maybe they were moving in that direction before. Like, I'm not entirely sure I watched Series 5. So maybe Black Mirror already moved in that direction in Series 5, I'm not sure. But anyway, I think of Black Mirror as being more about technology, and Series 6 felt a little bit weak from that point of view. As I said, having more to do with other types of stories. Except for the first one, the series opener, episode 1, that was amazing, called Joan is Awful. Loved that episode, really interesting. And the topic itself fed into some of the podcasts that I've been listening to, because, not to give anything away, but there's a little bit in it about artificial intelligence, AI and quantum computing, things like that. So that's where the technology comes into play. It was a very, very interesting episode. I enjoyed it a lot. And then the ones in the middle of the season were all good television, highly recommended. It's all very entertaining and very well done. But as I said, more about supernatural stuff and crime and things like that. But then the final episode is also not really technology based. Well, it's not technology based at all. But it's a great, great story. So the final episode I really loved. I can't remember the name of it now. I can't even remember the name of the episode. But it's highly recommended. It's set in the UK. Of course, Black Mirror is based in the UK. and set there in, I don't know, the 50s or 60s, probably the 60s. And it's a little bit topical because it has to do with immigration a little bit and racism, but then it gets into the supernatural. And the main character, an actress that I've never seen before, I don't know who she is. She was amazing. She was wonderful. And the main actor opposite her, again, I can't talk about anything about who they are, what the two characters are, how they relate to each other, because that would give away the story. And it's a story you really want to discover on your own. But the two of them have amazing chemistry and a really fun story, really interesting and imaginative, very surprising. And that's pretty rare for me these days because I've seen so much television in my life, so many movies, that it feels like I've seen it all. And now whenever I see a new show or a new movie, it just feels like a variation of something I've already seen. And I suppose that is true about this as well, but it did push the envelope a little bit and surprise me and do things that were just very entertaining, and I enjoyed quite a bit. Yeah, so highly recommended. Episode 1 and episode 5, and the ones in the middle are good too. So that's a pop culture update. I've been continuing with a show called No Ordinary Life. I talked about it already. It's a story of a typical American family, mother, father, 2 children, teenage son, teenage daughter, and they all get superpowers. And then it's a story of them learning to deal with it, and a lot of family relationship stuff mixed in. So it leans very heavily on emotional drama of their lives, teenagers with boyfriends and girlfriends and relationships between parents and children and in-laws, all the usual, almost tropes of these kinds of family-based shows, almost like a sitcom or a family drama with the added element that they all have superpowers. And it's not a great show, but I mean, it's good enough. It's keeping my interest, and each episode is like a little potato chip. It's not a very demanding show, so you can sort of just start the next episode, like popping the next potato chip in your mouth, and that was fun. I enjoyed that, and then you can just go on to the next one, and you're not expecting world-beating drama, or ideas that are going to blow your mind or anything. It's just little fun little things that happen in their lives. And of course there are villains. The superheroes have to fight the super villains and the bad guys, and crime, fighting crime and stuff like that. Yeah, I wouldn't say you have to watch this show. It's not must-watch television, but it's fine. It's entertaining. And that's all I have for pop culture update. I don't really have a YouTube stories update. I noticed that Itchy Boots posted her new video. It will be the final video, perhaps, in her Getting Through the Mud of Liberia series. But I don't have any data, so I can't actually watch the episode. I have no more data left. So I still don't know what happened to her, because her motorcycle is breaking down from going through the mud. She burned out her clutch. So I don't know how she's going to make it to a big city, where she can order new clutch plates and have her motorcycle worked on. She has to have a skilled mechanic. She can't just go to like a village shop. They can't work on a motorcycle like hers. She needs a Honda specialists, I think. But I haven't watched that episode yet because I don't have any data. And what else? A podcast update, I suppose. I could talk about that a little bit. I was listening to one last night, and it's the freshest one in my mind. I believe it's from Radiolab. Yeah, Radiolab, and it is called The Fellowship of the Tree Rings. And it was really kind of interesting. It's the story of a group of scientists who study tree rings. And they have a name for them. They even have their own name to talk about their specialty. I think it's something like dendrochronologists. Something like that, dendrochronologists. And the idea, of course, is that when trees grow, they grow each year by a certain amount. And then if you cut down the tree, you can see the rings, right? And you can count the rings. If the tree has 150 rings, that tree is 150 years old. And there are scientists who study this because there's so many ways you can come at it that all the rings look different. They can be, some of them are really thin, some of them are thicker, some of them are different color, some of them have stains in them. And if you study these rings, you can get a picture of history because you can use those rings to look back in time. You look at the ring from 1859, and it's a really, really big, thick ring that can tell you about the weather conditions that year, that the tree was very healthy and it grew a lot. Or if you see some stains or something, it could be it was attacked by beetles or bugs, or there was a fire, and you can see evidence of the fire in the tree rings. So you can use the rings of the tree to kind of look back over history. And I guess there was a conference where like 200 of these people came together for a big academic conference, and some of them met in a bar, and each of them have their own specialty, and they just started chatting amongst themselves, and all their various specialties came together to expand knowledge about tree rings. And the episode is all about this, about these three dendrochronologists in particular, and how they pooled their research and their knowledge to learn new things. And yeah, it's really very fascinating because it started with one man who was studying trees in Florida, way down at the tip of Florida, and he found rings in his trees that were like microscopically thin, like the thinnest rings he had ever seen. And he didn't really know why the rings were so thin. And this was a mystery. And he told the other dendrochronologists about this, and like, would you have an explanation for this? And they're busy talking about this. And they came up with this idea, which turned out to be true, that every time there was an incredibly thin ring, it was because there was a hurricane or several hurricanes that year. Because, as I've seen this for myself, a hurricane or a typhoon, the winds are so powerful that it will strip a tree bare. So when a hurricane moves through, it tears everything off the tree, tears off the leaves, tears off, pine needles, branches. Like, it just basically strips it down to the trunk. So therefore, that year, the tree doesn't have leaves or pine needles or anything, absorbing sunlight so that the tree can grow. It's basically stunted that year because a hurricane came along and just stripped the tree of all of its stuff. And so then they went back, and then it turns out that one of the dendrochronologists, they had this theory about it, and they wondered, well, how can we prove this? And the guy could take his tree, count the rings, and figure out exactly which ring lined up with which year, and then they could find out when there were hurricanes, because there was a record. Someone had kept a record of all the hurricanes going back 150 years, and it turns out that every year where there was a lot of hurricanes lined up with the year when the tree ring was really thin. So it was like a ta-da moment, it was like the light bulb went off. It's like, they match perfectly. Thin ring matches hurricane. And it turns out that they could add to the hurricane knowledge because the human record of hurricanes only went back like 150 years. But tree rings go back many more centuries. So once they established this system and the data, now they could go back beyond the written record and use the tree rings to see when hurricanes hit in various areas. So basically you can take a tree And they take a core sample, of course. They don't cut down the tree to do this. They take a tiny core sample, pull it out, look at all the rings in the core sample, and now they can go back in time and actually recreate when there were major hurricanes going back centuries, which is very, very cool. There was also one of their dendrochronologists, her specialty was diving down to shipwrecks and taking samples of the wood in the ships. And then she could look at the tree ring pattern in the wood of shipwrecks. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know that all of her data lined up with the tree rings and the hurricanes, because, it makes perfect sense, most of the time when a ship sinks, it's because it was caught in a hurricane. So this hurricane hits, sinks all these ships, destroys all these trees, and then you can see the history in the rings. And they could line up the tree rings with the hurricanes with the shipwrecks. And they're just kind of pooling all of their knowledge together. And there's more, because the first guy, the one who had this idea to begin with, he was really interested in pirates. It was like a passion of his. And one of the other dendrochronologists had all this data open up on her computer, and they have charts and graphs and things. And she just happened to notice there was like a 70-year gap where none of this was happening. Like there were no hurricanes. And this had something to do with the sun and weather patterns and this, that, and the other. There was, I forget the technical name for it, but there was like a 70 or like a centuries, 1 century long period where there were no shipwrecks, no thin tree rings, and no hurricanes. And that 70-year period lined up perfectly with the golden age of pirates. Because, of course, pirates are out there roaming the 7 seas in their ships, attacking other ships, and they suddenly had this 70-year period of no hurricanes, no storms, and it was smooth sailing. So this world of piracy just exploded. So that 70-year period is when we have all of the famous pirates of history. Blackbeard and like every pirate you can name from history, they all come from that 70-year period, which they can see in the trees because there are no thin rings, and we can see because there was no hurricanes and no shipwrecks, because nobody was being sunk by hurricanes. And so, yeah, that's it. That is a Radiolab, the Fellowship of the Tree Rings. This podcast just came out. So yeah, as I said, I listened to that last night as I was trying to go to sleep, and I found it quite interesting. And perhaps one more podcast to end my thoughts this morning. This is another one from Radiolab. Well, I listened to it on Radiolab. And it is called Eye in the Sky. It's also an older podcast. I think it first aired on Radiolab in 2015, but they just re-aired it recently, because it was one of their popular ones, so they played it again. I don't think I had ever heard it before, but I think it might have been on another podcast called Note to Self, and maybe Radiolab is just playing it on their network, or maybe they redid it. But anyway, it's kind of a Radiolab podcast, Note to Self podcast. And I found it very interesting because it does have a technology angle. And it's called Eye in the Sky, and it's the story of a U.S. Military dude. He was in Iraq during the U.S. invasion of Iraq. So it goes back to the year 2004, and this guy, Ross McNutt, this American, I'm not sure what his role was in the military. I don't think he was a soldier, but he was, in the support systems, the technology side of things. And at that time, in 2004, apparently there were a lot of people getting killed and injured by roadside bombs. These homemade bombs that are planted at the side of roads, and then the vehicles drive over them and they blow up and everybody gets killed or injured. And there was a big increase in these, and they were trying to figure out what they could do about this, how to prevent this. And Ross McNutt came up with this idea. I don't know how this fits in with drones, because this made me think about drones. But maybe drones didn't exist back then in the way they do now. I'm not sure. But he came up with this idea of taking a small plane and a 44 megapixel camera and figured out a way to have this plane flying over the city constantly and taking a picture of the entire city every second. So 24 hours a day, or maybe this is probably only in daylight hours, I guess. They don't specify. But it's up there taking pictures every second of the whole city. And then they download all this data, then they wait, and then a bomb goes off. And they know exactly, of course, where the bomb went off geographically. They know where in the city, what street it happened. They can pinpoint it, and now they can go back to all their photographs of the city, go back in time, picture by picture by picture by picture, focusing on that spot until they see someone planting the bomb. They have a picture of this guy because they filmed all the time. Every second they're taking a picture, and they just have to go back through their pictures like they're looking at a video, essentially, going back in time, back and back and back, looking at that spot where the bomb went off until, oh, look, there's a guy digging a hole and putting a bomb there. And then they can see, oh, he got into this car, and then the car, they can track the car through the city, where it goes, where it parks, and they see the guy go into the house. So essentially, they have the entire city under surveillance all the time. And every time a bomb goes off, they can just go back through their photographs until they see the guy putting it in place, and then they can track him all the way back to his headquarters. And then they send the soldiers in, and they break down the doors, and they capture everybody and get all their bomb-making equipment. So like I said, they did this with a plane. And maybe drones didn't exist back then. My timing on drones isn't clear. But what makes the story really interesting is that Ross McNutt, when he came back to the United States after the war, he founded his own company. And the name of the company is a bit unfortunate, I find. It's called Persistent Surveillance Systems. You can see their website, so Ross McNutt, Persistent Surveillance Systems. They have a website and everything. And his idea is that he could sell his technology, his services, to like police departments in the United States, where they could do this during the war in Iraq. They could just as easily do it in Chicago or New York or LA, any big city. They just send up either a drone or an airplane, and it just takes pictures day and night of the city. And then if there is a shooting somewhere in the city, they know exactly where the shooting took place, and they can look at their photographs, and then they can see, a vehicle there or a person, and then the shooting happens, and then they can follow that car, where it goes, and track this person all the way back to their home or their sort of gang location, anything like that. And an interesting thing, what this story is leading to, this is all just simple technology when you think about it, but of course it touches on the ideas of privacy and surveillance, right? That's what the whole story really was about. And his company, Ross McNutt's company, being sensitive to this, they actually put in like self-imposed limits on the resolution of their photos. Cameras are so powerful now that if you're taking pictures from the sky, you can see everything. You could identify people, you can see exactly what they're doing, where they're going, you can see everything. So his company, being sensitive to this issue, they put a limit on their own cameras and says, okay, we're only going to go to this resolution and no farther. And I guess the resolution is so low that they really can't see much detail. And it's, like I said, a limitation they put on themselves. They don't have to do this, but they can't actually make out, features of people. I don't think they can read like license plate numbers, anything like that. It's very, very fuzzy, to the point where an average person, like if you or I were sitting in front of these photos or this video they make from the photos, we couldn't really make anything out. But they get so accustomed to what they're seeing, they can tell, oh, that's a car, that's a person. And then like the car is really just a dot. It doesn't actually look like a car. All they're looking for is, where did that car go? They're not really trying to get personal information about the person or the car. They're just looking for movements, really. And I guess the idea is then once they have the movement established, they can give that to the police, and then the police can go do their thing. So yeah, they can look at it. It makes me think of The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, where at one point, Tank, is that his name? The guy who's always looking at the computer screen, and you see all those green letters and symbols just sort of flowing across, down the screen. And then Neo is standing over his shoulder just looking at all these weird green letters. And that's the Matrix. That's the visual representation of the Matrix. And he's wondering, like, how do you see anything? And the guy, Tank, he says, well, yeah, you just, you see all these green letters and numbers, but I see redhead, blonde, brunette. He sees physical objects. He sees people. He actually sees the imagery represented by these, he does it so often, it's instinctive for him. He can see the world, even though to the other person it just looks like gibberish. And I guess this surveillance footage from this company is the same. And the average person couldn't make out any detail from it at all. But if you're an expert and you're used to it, it's like, oh, okay, that's a car, that's a truck, that's a bus. And it's just basically a dot, and then they can track it. But, of course, as soon as they try to sell this to the police departments and they need funding for it and it goes to the city council, now you have average citizens showing up protesting about surveillance. Like, they don't want to be, they don't want cameras in the sky, filming everything. They're worried about, all the amendment rights they have in the United States for unlawful search and seizure. And, how does this fit in with the laws, basically? Like, if you have all this evidence from these cameras, is it even admissible in court? There would be court challenges against it because you didn't have a warrant, to get this information. Is it public? Is it private? And so, of course, there was a lot of pushback, a lot of people protesting against this technology. They don't, it's like talking about a police state now where we're under constant surveillance by cameras. And so people don't like this idea. And how do you balance the benefits of this kind of technology, the security you get? Because they've done experiments in various cities, and they've seen, the crime rate just plummet once they put one of these systems into place. So there's a big societal benefit, but perhaps at the cost of surveillance. It's one of these things where I get very tired of these arguments, but you can do the slippery slope kind of argument. There's actually a whole podcast episode all about this, about slippery slope, and how the whole idea of the slippery slope has gone into our world. And all politicians, everybody uses it in debates all the time. And quite often it doesn't really make any sense. It's just fear mongering. But the idea is, okay, we're using this technology to track a criminal who just killed someone. Okay, that's good, but maybe this same technology will be used for bad. Like maybe someone, you can track people and see what they're doing all day long. And they're not doing anything wrong. They're not criminals. They're not breaking the law. So that's a slippery slope. Now the government can track all of its citizens' movements all day long. And of course, Ross McNutt, I think, would argue against that because, as he talked about and as the podcast talked about, they even limit their resolution. We can't even see people. We just see these fuzzy dots, things like that. And they're trying to prove the benefits of this technology. And in the podcast, they talk about going to Mexico. They got hired by a city, it might have been Juarez in Mexico. I want to say Juarez for some reason, where there was a lot of cartel violence, and people were just being killed, practically on a daily basis. And they hired his company to come in and put the system into place, and then the killings just dropped to nothing. I guess they had one really huge success where there were so many killings, like cars pulling up in front of other cars and then, shooting people and then driving away. And I guess a police officer was killed by men, in a car. They could see the car tracking this police officer from her house, following her, and then at a traffic light or something, they all jump out and shoot and kill her, and then they drive away. But of course, Ross McNutt is up there with his planes and his drone with persistent surveillance systems, and they followed these cars all the way back to a house, and it turned out that house was where, the most powerful cartel was complete. That was where everybody was from the cartel, and they busted that place, and then crime just practically disappeared overnight. So the technology was that powerful, and he's trying to use that as an example of how successful this can be and trying to sell it to American cities. But it's a very difficult thing to sell to Americans when they're worried about, surveillance and privacy, personal space, personal privacy, things like that. So that was a very interesting story, I thought, and the podcast episode is called Eye in the Sky, if you wanted to look for it on Radiolab. And with that, I think I will shut down my morning journal session. I have to decide whether I'm moving into town for a couple of nights, and I should. I really should. I have to go out. I have to go outside, look out the window, and actually I have to go for a walk. I have to buy some credit, get that on my phone so I can buy data. Once I have data, then I can book the hotel room. It all comes back to technology. Without technology, I can hardly do anything. So, shutting down, and hope you have a good day out there. And who knows, maybe next morning I'll be waking up in a hotel room. We'll see. I'll see you then.